Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you all for joining Steve and I this morning. We just want to thank you all as we go on this journey today, as we have an open discussion about our topic. And it's about the importance of buying local and really building a local program that supports not just your community, but your agency. And I want to thank Steve for his time today, for putting this together and emailing out all the invites. And thank you all for responding. I look forward to this. Just to give you a little background about myself, I am currently a community engagement manager with Procreated. I've been with Procreated about a year and 4 months now. It's been an exciting ride. Prior to Procreated, I was 21 years with the County of Monterey as the Chief Procurement Officer. Prior to that, 7 years in the college industry in the Santa Cruz area. And then prior to that, 15 years as a civilian employee with the Navy system in Monterey at the Naval Postgraduate School on the supply logistics warehouse operations on the Western Seaboard. Also, I am the past president of the California Association of Public Procurement Officials and also the past president of the National Procurement Institute, home of the AEP Award. And Steve, why don't you introduce yourself since you're going to be there with me today?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Mike. Tough act to follow. My name is Steve Isaac. I'm the director of marketing, working closely with Mike's community engagement team on engaging specifically with our government community and getting, purchasers from across the country checking out Procurated. Prior to my time with Procurated, I also worked for e-procurement company called Mercell, based in Europe, and that was sort of my intro to procurement land. Prior to that, I spent about a decade in tech and startup marketing. During today's session, our chat is open as well as our Q&A module. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them into either of those spaces. And depending on the question, I might interrupt Mike and introduce it into our conversation, or we're going to have a little time for Q&A at the back end of our session. We might save it until then. But yes, feel free to throw out any of the questions and comments you might have as we go today.
And thank you, Steve. And as Steve mentioned, yes, please jump in, throw questions in, chat. I want this to be as interactive as possible, even though we're doing Zoom. I do want this to be as interactive as possible. I really do miss the whole lot of the face-to-face trainings and things I've done in the past, but this is great. I'm glad to be here today. And today, as we begin our discussion about when it comes to spending your money, and I'm not just speaking about your own money, your own personal funds, even though it's important as well on this discussion today, but how are you spending your agency's dollars? How are you spending those in accordance to your policies, your procedures, your mandates? But how are you supporting your local economy and your local economics within your organization and your community? So the question today is it important to buy local? And if anybody would like to respond back to that, please throw in the chat, throw in the Q&A. I'd like to hear your feedback is it important to buy local as a government agency?
We get a win-win here in the chat. Absolutely.
Yes. Good.
People are bought in to the premise, which is good.
All right. So what are we getting?
Absolutely. Yes, very important. Yes, we need to support our community. Definitely good takes.
Wow. Great feedback. And this is a great way to start off. I love the interaction. So have you asked this question? Have you discussed it as an agency? And more importantly, if not, why not? This to me is something that's very important as a procurement professional. We have the responsibility to ask this very important question. And if we haven't, then we need to. It can't go unasked or delayed, especially in the economy and the times we're facing today, especially with supply chain issues. We have inflation. There's a lot of things impacting our purchasing volume and our power. It's also your responsibility to act on the answer. So ignoring this topic just means that you're missing out on the opportunity to really have a huge impact on your local economy. And we're going to talk about those ways of those impacts on the economy. So a question and a survey question here. Does your agency currently have a local purchasing policy in place? And it doesn't have to be a policy. It could be a preference. Feel free to put your response in the chat. And then, so yes or no, here's a survey question. Take your time right here to go ahead and answer that survey question. We really appreciate your feedback and your interaction on this.
Yeah, we'll just let this this poll run for a quick second here. And as we note, yeah, if this is not a clear yes or no for you, that's totally okay. Feel free to put any comments or other answers in the chat, of course.
Can't wait to see the results on this one.
Give it one more second for any additional answers. All right, let me share the results.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it looks like we're at about a 64% yeses, 28% no's, and we get two sort ofs, which again, I'd love to hear a little more about your sort of if it's not the world's longest answer, or if it is, feel free to type it in the chat. But yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm excited to hear that too. The 64%, that's awesome. The 28%, hey, that's good too, because we're going to be talking about ways maybe your agency should be looking at a local preference policy or local buy, and why it is important to buy local. And sort of, hopefully we're going to get you past that sort of and into that yes column. So great feedback.
Yeah, and one of Andrea in the chat mentioned that she believes they're supposed to have a policy. The basic rule of thumb is to follow MGL procurement.
Okay, cool. Any other responses there?
And yet, Tom mentioned into the Q&A, he's relatively new to his position, and he thinks he's a yes, but he's not sure. So he'll be investigating that at his agency.
Great. Well, and that's what this is about. These discussions that we do, it's about thought-provoking, to get you to really think about what you're doing as an agency, and are you doing something as an agency? And that's something that I always question myself about, and my staff and my team about, is, are we doing this? I go to a conference, I hear this topic, I go back and I say, hey, are we doing this? They go, I don't know, are we? And then we start doing research, and then we find out, well, we're supposed to, but nobody knew we were supposed to. So this is great feedback, great comments.
Yeah, another comment in the chat that they're guided by bids, which overrule the desire to stay local.
Okay.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'm going to hopefully touch on that a little bit later in the presentation too. Okay. So what are some of the benefits associated with sourcing local suppliers within your community? And I really like to hear some of the feedback that maybe some of you have is to what are the benefits? Did you know that increasing your local supplier awareness within your agency can really drive down your purchasing costs? We did this over a 5-year period. We were able to work with our local small businesses. And what we found was we had 28 county departments all buying from some of the same suppliers and small businesses, but we weren't strategic sourcing that through the central procurement office. Once we identified that, we were actually able to get a better price, but we were able to direct more business as well to that small local business and supported that. And then what support and how that impacts your regional community programs. So I'd like to hear some feedback from all of you on what do you see the benefits are of a local purchasing program.
Jennifer, Julia, we have multiple comments about keeping money local, boosting the local economy, the money staying in the community. I think we definitely have some info on that as well. Yeah, strengthening the local economy. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Great feedback. One of the things we looked at in Monterey County was what would a local preference policy or local buy policy, what would it have on the impact of Monterey County? And some of the things that we evaluated and we looked at was it helps generate local jobs. Small businesses are job creators within our community. And we looked at how important that was because those local jobs and those small business generators, that means they were hiring local individuals. Those local individuals then now were earning an income. They were then spending that income, whether it was on rent, groceries, community activities, or some supporting community programs and youth activities. It improves the local economy. Spending your agency's dollars locally as much as possible really ensures that your sales taxes are reinvested in your local economy, which then results in improvements in your community. We had a local POW program here in Salinas that really was struggling with a budget and money through the police department and through the city. They really wanted to get this POW program going. So what they did is they reached out to the small local businesses within the community, and they were the ones that generated over 80% of the funding needed in order to remodel and reopen that activity center for high at-risk children, which then had a huge impact on the community, which then reduced the overall crime statistics within the community, but then also provided after-school homework facilities for children in need. So it also helps support your agency diversity programs. In Monterey County, we had a goal and a mandate to reach a certain dollar spend with our diverse programs and diverse suppliers throughout our tri-county area. So in Monterey County, and I'll show you in a little bit, we adopted a local preference program, but it also not only included Monterey County, it included Santa Cruz County and San Benito County, which we considered our tri-county partners. It also has environmental benefits, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then diverse choices. Again, it gives you better choices when you create that partnership with your local suppliers, which then they grow and they may open one or two additional businesses, which then helps your local economy. But then also, more importantly, what about the protection of our environment? You know, purchasing locally means less packaging. It means less waste. It means fewer plastics and reduced carbon emissions from shipping. That was one of the areas that we looked at, as well as how could we reduce our overall footprint when buying local. Santa Cruz County, which is right next door to Monterey County here in California, they have a very strict program on buying local, which then reduces green waste. So great opportunities to grow your program.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, Mike, because I think you know, if diverse spend goals were have been the story of the last decade, and I think that's going to continue to be the story, and those goals are going to continue to evolve and grow. But I also think green spend goals are going to start popping up pretty universally for procurement agencies and teams across the country.
Yeah, I agree. So I did a survey and actually a search on Google, and I actually talked to some of my peers throughout the industry. And did you know that it's estimated that for every $100 that you spend at a local business within your community, that $68 of that stays in your community? And that can fluctuate depending on your tax rate that your community has, but that's about on average. And furthermore, did you know that if you were to spend that same $100 at a national chain, that it's estimated that only 43% of that stays in your community? And again, it depends on that national chain and how many local residents are they employing within that chain. Is it a brick and mortar building? Do they have employees? Or is it more of a shop online opportunity? And that could impact those dollar amounts or figures there. But what about the potential social benefits? Do you know that when you shop locally, both personally and professionally, you're supporting your neighborhood and individuals who you may know personally. You're also in a position to support your business owners get through the tough times of both financial crisis and environmental crises. One of the things that COVID over the past several years prior to me retiring about a year ago really showed my organization that by creating those partnerships and supporting my small local businesses, that I had emergency outreach power to them during COVID when I was in need of cleaning supplies, masks, COVID related items. I really could rely on my local suppliers to really support my agency in that need when I couldn't get it from the national organizations because everybody was pulling from them. So you're both in positions to assist and support one another as you help your small local businesses grow. Anything additional, Steve?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and seeing it kind of laid out as the cents per dollar going back to the community, I think is compelling as not just a reason to kind of look at this, but also maybe that's the evidence you need when you're going and pushing things like a local preference, which I know we'll talk into, or policy changes within your agency. These are the kind of statistics that are going to help you engage in these activities a little bit more strategically and consistently.
Yeah, and that's a great point. When I presented to my agency the need for a local preference policy, and I had to create it, I actually went out and did all the research and got all the statistics and data that I could get on what a local policy would mean for our organization, but also for our tri-county area. So I went out and got all that data, and I was armed with that as I created the policy and as I presented it to our decision makers. So here's one of the things I did on an annual basis after we created our local preference policy. First, have you ever performed an analysis as to how your agency spends its money? It's very interesting. It's very telling when you actually do this for the very first time. It's very telling on where you're spending your money and how you're spending your money as an agency. So one of the mandates of our local preference policy was I had to report annually, not only to my board of supervisors, but to our EOCC and a few other local groups within our community on how the county was spending its money in order to meet our mandate on diverse support in businesses. So at the top of the screen, you'll see the total fiscal year 2016-17 procurement there, the little picture there. Hopefully you can read that. I actually had to break it out by fiscal year. And as you see, I had to break it out by state. Then I had to further break that out by counties within California. And then even further, actual down to the cities within Monterey County. That's the detailed information that my board wanted to know. And I had a target every year to improve that spend, not only in California, but within Monterey County, and then within certain cities within Monterey County that were targeted or tagged as low income cities within the county that really needed to grow their economic structure. And so what we did is I had to just report annually, and then I had a target given to me by the board and the finance team as to where we needed to target our money back. And then in performing an internet search, I found that locally owned businesses circulate on average 3 times more money back into the local economy than major chains do. That was interesting to me because I've been a long time youth sports leader in my community for over 38 years. I ran youth programs as president of different organizations, and we do a lot of fundraising. As some of you probably have kids and you do fundraisings to help your organization. We would send out fundraising letters to our local businesses and really try to go after like the large sports chains and them. The ones that really responded back supported our program were the small back more than the large chains did. Not saying that they're not important, but the small businesses are the ones that really support your local economy.
We had a comment in the chat, Mike, noting that K Matlock notes, so we're really small, and sometimes the locals don't have whatever they're looking to purchase. And I think that's definitely valid, right? There are going to be times when your local suppliers aren't going to necessarily meet every one of your procurement needs. Mike, and I think we're going to talk about into some of the methods and the ways we can kind of boost local spend, and some of those are kind of sweeping, and some of those are a little more granular. And I think some of those will apply sort of regardless of scale. Some of those are going to be useful even if you're from a small community or your local supplier base isn't so extensive.
Yeah, and I agree. And one of the ways we did that with some of our small local businesses that didn't maybe have the volume of inventory is we actually worked with them to create a network of small businesses that had the same type of services or goods. And we had South County, North County, and then Mid County in California, Monterey County, and we had them work together. But what we're going to talk about in a little bit is a platform that's been created in technology that really helps you do that in a more economical and more efficient way. And thank you, yes, Steve. But we had to do it the hard way. But there's an easy way for you to do it, and we're going to share that with you shortly. So buying local, again, is an investment in the future of your community. Did you know that local business owners, again, are 3 times more likely to support local charities and causes than national counterparts? And I've seen that over the years. So spending your dollars with local suppliers becomes a double dip of good tax dollar stewardship. Because if you have local businesses, they hire local individuals, they live within their communities, they get paid, they're going to spend those dollars they're earning in the local economy. Those local tax dollars then come back into your coffers, whether you're a city, county, jurisdiction, or township. Eventually, those tax dollars have a full circle comeback into your local programs that really help improve the lives of the taxpayers within the community. It's been proven. And we did a huge survey here in Monterey County. We actually hired a consultant. Our county went out, and we actually found within a 4-year period of time, a huge improvement in our community services and programs based off of the support and success of our local preference policy. And I'll show you where that came into play. So what policy changes can you suggest to your governing board or decision makers that impact your purchasing decisions and drive local purchasing? And here's what I want to hear back from you. I want to hear back from all of you is what policy changes can you suggest to your governing board or decision makers? You want those in the Q&A or chat. Steve will keep an eye on those and we'll read some of those out, but I really want to hear from you.
Yeah, and we'll be getting into a few on our end. We'll see how much overlap we have, and I'm sure we're not comprehensive with what we have in our presentation. So,
Any coming in?
Not yet, Mike. So maybe as we go, we'll get people's juices flowing a little bit, and we'll do some brainstorming at the end too.
I'll give you guys some time to think about that one.
K Matlock notes that we do have someone noting, one of their agencies, multiple agencies actually being referenced with 10% difference on bids to locals. So
wow,
we'll definitely be looking into the local preference, Mike, that you put together and see how that compares. Wow. And then also just a simple goal. Stacy Gregg noted a simple goal carries a lot of weight with buy-in from the top. So if the top is bought in to buying local, well, that has an impact. And Stacy also notes a 10% goal, a 10% purchasing goal for purchasing in South Carolina, where she's from.
Wow. Yeah. And that's a great point. As the CPO for Monterey County, one of the things that I tried to do is I tried to work with all my county departments and all my elected officials and the decision makers on how they spent their dollars for their departments. And just quickly, one of the big ones I had to deal with was our sheriff's department. Our sheriff's department would spend annually almost $4 million a year on vehicle replacements. new vehicles, new pursuit vehicles. And I met with the sheriff, the elected official, who's the sheriff, and I met with him and I sat down with him and said, look, here's what you're spending annually. You're spending this outside of the county, but also outside of the state. I know you're going out to bid. I know you're getting these bid prices. Why don't you give me an opportunity to work with our local dealerships here in Monterey County to see what I can do for you and maybe get you a better price? He goes, okay, I tried it, but it didn't work. So he gave me the opportunity. My team and I, we sat down with our local dealerships. We were actually able to get better pricing from our local dealerships once they understood that we were spending over $4 million a year in pursuit vehicles. They were able to lower their price and beat the price of the out-of-state dealer office just for vehicle purchases, $4 million in local purchases. That helped our community greatly because those dealerships then started supporting youth programs higher level in our community. So yeah, it's a great point, great opportunity. So one of the things during my term as a CPO for my agency, I wrote and pushed forward a local preference policy. And this is something that I had focused on the first 3 years I took the job. And I really, working with my local chambers, my PTAC, and local business owners, the complaint I always heard from them was the county isn't utilizing our services. We're not getting the opportunity. So I sat down with my decision makers, the board of supervisors, who I had direct connection to, and I actually had a seat at the table. And that's one of the most important things as a procurement professional is to have a seat at the table with the decision makers. But I was able to put forward to them a policy that qualified local vendors to provide goods and services to our agency. And I was excited that the policy was reviewed and adopted by our full board unanimously on August 29th of 2012. That policy still stands today. And here's just a snapshot of what that policy looks like. And if you look at section B, and in the procurement of goods or services in which price is the determining factor for award of the contract, a 5% preference shall be subtracted from a bid submitted by a responsive local vendor in determining the lowest responsive bidder. So we actually had a 5% that we would apply to those bids that were price was a determining factor. And if a local vendor was higher, we would still award to them if they were within 5% of the lowest bidder. So our county, our organization was willing to spend more, even though it meant less budget money, but more because they realized the impact that those local dollars would then in turn have on the local economy. So this is just a snapshot of our page.
Yeah, Mike's email is going to be up at the end. So I'm sure if you want the full policy or you want to talk about every step he had to go through to get his counsel on board, I'm sure Mike's going to be very happy to engage with you about that. So keep an eye out for his email at the end of the presentation. Definitely.
And then on E, we even had a 10% for points. If it was a point award system, we actually gave them additional 10% if they were a local vendor. And we identify what a local vendor is. Again, they had to have a brick and mortar building, and they had to employ local employees. So those are requirements that we put forth. Our board adopted it. I'm glad to say it's still in place and it's still standing today. So again, local preference, has several possible components to it, and it doesn't just have to rely on one. It could be a preference for a discount or a scoring adjustment, or it can be local subprime requirement. Now, I know works of public improvement are very stringent about how you can award works of public improvement. Has to be the lowest bidder, no ifs, and or buts. No difference in our organization. But one of the things that we added to our works of public improvement bids was a good faith effort statement that those contractors that were awarded a win of a works of public improvement bid that they would make a good faith effort in hiring local subcontractors or hiring a local laborers if needed for the project. And that is something too that we're very proud of, and that is something that our contractors who now know and do business with Monterey County and have done business for over 20 years, they know that requirement's there and they help meet it as much as possible. And we know that sometimes you can't get the labor force locally. You do have to go out of the area, which we understand. But we have created that partnership and that open communication with our contractors so they don't know how important it is to meet some of these requirements that we've put forward. So keep in mind, and this is very important, if you're creating a local preference, you will need to have a set of criteria in place to certify local businesses, as well as a method of tracking and maintaining that certification. One of the things that we tried to do early on in the adoption of our local preference policy is we were trying to rely on the state and their certification process. What we found was the state's process was so far behind in notification of suppliers or vendors that maybe failed to meet the requirements or their certification turned out. We decided to bring that in-house, and I actually had one full-time person that was their responsibility, was to maintain and watch all of our local suppliers' registration, their insurance, but also their small business certifications and any of the diverse women-owned, veteran-owned, minority-owned business role in meeting our local preference policy, as well as their physical address of where payments were being mailed to for that brick and mortar facility. And Steve, I think you have a comment?
Yeah, I think Mike, one good thing here is that a lot of modern e-procurement tools as well, many of them have the capacity to be helpful in this, so it isn't necessarily as manual as it once was. But again, making sure that data is current and making this process smooth for those local businesses is going to be critical. Making sure that it's easy for them to participate in your opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. So there are other lighter weight alternatives to local preference that can drive local purchasing. It doesn't have to be a policy. It doesn't have to be a ordinance. It can just be a practice too. Okay. A lot of this too is impacted by your P card and small dollar spending. One of the things that we tried to do is in our P card program, and we had over, last time I looked, it was like 900 card users within our agency that had access to P cards. And that's a lot of daily small dollar purchasing. And what we tried to get them to do is use small local businesses as much as possible. And one of the ways is incentivize how those P cards are used. Your P card holders to buy local whenever possible. We had a lot of them that wanted to buy online, shop Google, Amazon, which is fine. But if we have a local supplier that has that same goods or products and they're within our preference policy, they really need to be using that local business. So what we did is we tried to encourage colleagues to buy local by making it fun. And here's something you could do or consider is highlighting a quarterly local hero, for example, the P card purchaser who spends the most. Really highlight them, not just internally, but maybe out externally too. We as an organization, we do a lot of promoting and acknowledgement of teams and efforts, not just internally, but we would always sometimes work with our local paper. We have a weekly paper that we would sometimes post in and say, hey, here's our hero of the week. Here's what this individual was able to accomplish. So you really want to make it creative and interesting and encouraging people to really utilize that P card in a wise manner when buying local. New technologies and peer reviews. Here's an opportunity. In today's world, technology really is advancing faster than ever. This includes procurement technology, and it changes so quickly. E-procurement solutions, they can make it easier for local suppliers to access your opportunities as long as your information is up to date and current on your platform. And then depending on the solution, you may be able to send bid notices to an even broader universe of suppliers, including your small and local diverse businesses using commodity codes. One of the ways that we see this happening is through, again, new technology. And me being now with Procurated and coming from the procurement side, now being on what some refer to as the supplier side. But really, I don't see Procurated as a supplier. I see us as a support team. We are here supporting all of you as public procurement professionals in the ability to be able to unlock peer insights into supplier performance. What better way to identify how our supplier is doing, or even identify new suppliers, maybe that you're looking for to do business with locally, than reaching out to your local peers. One of the things we didn't do well in Monterey County was work outside of our silo. As a procurement team, we always try to keep within our own industry, within our own county. We never really worked with our local cities or other jurisdictions in how we were procuring goods and services. About the last year there, we started networking more with the local cities. We started opening up and we started communicating. This is about the same time that Procurated came on to the platform, to the stage. And I can say that being with Procurated now for over a year and being able to share the value of what Procurated brings to the procurement profession is outstanding. This platform gives you the opportunity to not only write reviews and look at reviews, but it also gives you the ability to search out potential new suppliers that you may be looking for.
Yeah, and just I guess this page will do it. But yeah, one thing to note is for government, higher ed, and nonprofit agencies and institutions and purchasers, Procurated is free. So there's over 45,000 reviews of suppliers all over the country. As Mike's saying, discovering new suppliers and checking on their performance is something that you can do now for free. It's relatively easy to just jump in there. So we encourage you to do so. Highly recommend just checking it out.
Yeah. Just go to www.procurated.com right there on the screen. You can get started real easy. All you need is your agency email address, your first name, last name. You'll get verified. You'll receive an email with an access code and you're set to go. No commitment, no contract, no MOUs to sign. And as Steve mentioned, it is completely free. The platform, there is no cost for public agencies to access this platform. One of the things I wish I would have added to this screen, Steve, too, was a snapshot of the diversity part of the platform. The great thing about Procurated is you can actually break down your search by supplier or by a commodity or a service type. When searching, you can break down your search by women-owned, minority, vendor-owned, or some other business designation that you identify that's important to your organization. Those can be created for you within the platform. So that's one great thing too about the platform is we're highlighting in our search capabilities, in our reviews, in our suppliers on our platform, small, local, diverse businesses. That's one of the key areas that we're focusing on now is to really grow that because we know how important those small businesses are to you as organizations. Community outreach. What are you doing today to ensure that your current opportunities reach your local vendors? One of the things I found was we were hesitating to go out to our community and to our business groups. We were hesitating to talk with them because we always were under the belief as procurement professionals that we could not talk to our vendors or our suppliers because we were in either in a bid process or an informal process. We were always told, keep them arm's length. That has changed COVID has shown us that the importance of really engaging with our local suppliers, our local entities. The community outreach is important. I reach out to my PTAC, my chambers of commerce, the regional small business admin districts, your women business enterprise national council chapters. Reach out to them all. I encourage you to grow that partnership and that relationship with them, because that is critical in growing and really supporting a local preference or a local buy program. If you get their support, it's going to take off quickly. It's going to grow so fast. You're going to go, wow, why didn't we do this before? I had great success working with all of these entities within Monterey County once we launched our local preference program, and it really took off. I even did local training for our PTACs. I would go out as a chief procurement officer, and I would do training for the PTAC with all of their customers, which were the local suppliers, and I would teach them how to respond to a county RFP or RFQ. And I would also reach out and teach them the importance of their small business to our agency as a county. Because one of the things I always heard again was the county's not buying from us. The county's not buying, or your registration process is too hard, or your insurance requirements are too high. That's one thing you got to be flexible to, is to be able to work with your suppliers on fixing that registration process, streamlining it, and also the insurance issue. And those are things that I used to go out and really train on to our local small business. And we would actually do a registration training for them on site, and we would register them right there on site. So it's a good way to grow your program.
Yeah, and I think Mike, one important thing about this is that pretty much anyone at any of these types of organizations, anyone at your local PTAC, they're going to be excited to hear from you. You represent whatever your scale, like a significant amount of purchasing power that they're trying to drive directly to their members. And maybe they're not the most outgoing people. Maybe they're the ones who are hesitant to pick up the phone. So maybe you need to kind of make the first move here. They're going to want to hear from you, and they're going to be happy to slot you into their programming because you're going to be driving business to their members.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Especially local chambers too. Your small business chambers, they want to see you. They want to talk to you, and they'll be happy to talk to you. Survey number 2. So what activities are you planning to engage in to drive local purchasing at your agency? Again, this is where we want to hear your feedback. Here's a survey. I'll let Steve take this one from here.
Yeah, feel free. I believe this is set up so you can select multiple choices. It should be, if it's not letting you do that, pick the most important one. But what I would also say is if there's other ways that you've had success engaging with your local businesses or other brainstorms you've had or any other thoughts you have, feel free to throw those in the chat as well. And we'll wait a few minutes here or a few seconds here while we get some of these responses in.
I'm on the edge of my seat here waiting for it.
All right, just give it one more second. Let people read through all their options, and then give us their answers. A couple still trickling in. All right, I'll go ahead and share our results. So it looks like, looking at the results, the thing that clearly speaks to the most folks on our call is that engaging with your community organizations and your business associations, getting out there in the community and going to those groups and getting in front of them a little bit. We also have people talking about, working towards that local preference. That is maybe a steeper hill, but it is something that once it's in place is going to have a really dramatic impact on your community. In the chat, Stacy mentions she plans on having a training event for their local and disadvantaged businesses in March, and I think that's great. Wow, setting up those trainings, making it as easy as possible and as understandable as possible to get involved with your bids is critical.
Yeah, good point. I was just thinking about it too. There was another survey we should have thrown in there, and this goes to and any of you can respond back in the chat. How many of you have a survey that you do with your internal customers, those that you serve within your agency, that utilize your services within your agency, how many of you do a survey annually to see how you're performing? Anybody? And then what some of you maybe hopefully responded to that. How many of you?
A yes from Sabina, maybe next year from Jennifer.
Okay. How many of you survey your suppliers to see how you're doing as an agency? And not just hearing from them on their quarterly reviews on how they're performing, but how are you performing for them?
A yes on that from Jennifer.
Cool. You don't see that very often.
Tamara says that they did one this year.
What was your feedback like, Tamara?
Mixed reviews. That's what we get.
Cool. Yeah, you don't see that very often. You don't see public agencies surveying their customer, the supplier, because they are our customer. We're their customer, but they are our customer as well. And it's critical to know how we're doing in their eyesight too. So good.
Yeah. Tom mentions that they have a yearly conference with all of their agencies where they request feedback. His first with them will be in November. So that should be very eye-opening.
I'd like to hear how that goes. Wow.
Awesome.
Cool. So I want to close with two comments. The first is a quote from Michael H. Schumann, author of Going Local. And if anybody looking for a good book to read on really going local and what local suppliers mean to the economy, this is a great one. A quote from Michael: "Going local does not mean walling off the outside world. It means nurturing locally owned businesses which use local resources sustainably, employ local workers at decent wages, and serve primarily local consumers. It means becoming more self-sufficient and less dependent on imports. Control moves from the boardrooms of distant corporation and back into the community where it belongs." Great quote. I love it. You know, one of the things pandemic showed us too is we rely too much on resources outside of our control, which is sometimes outside of our communities. Lastly, socially promoting local suppliers demonstrates the support that your agency has for both the supplier and the community. Since our agency passed its local preference policy, it created more good PR. And my job was always to keep our board of supervisors, our elected officials, in good PR. Anytime the local press or news media called them and wanted to do a good story, they were happy and really improved our relationships with our suppliers and community. This really showed during the past several years of COVID, disasters, and now supply chain issues. Our local suppliers, through our efforts of creating that local partnership and trust, have really stepped up to the plate in supporting our agency during the toughest of times. Here's my final thought. And yes, that's a picture of my two cats. They support each other. Large box retailers and large out of the area suppliers are still a vital part of our business needs, and by no means am I stating that we step in harder at finding that happy balance that helps support our local suppliers. And that may be through creating a partnership with the local supplier and the national supplier that works for the requesting agency. I did that over several years. I created partnerships between some national suppliers and my local suppliers, where I was able to get that national supplier to support my local supplier with those goods I needed at a discounted price, so I still got a great price. Because as we all know, that when the storm or disaster hits, it's not taken into consideration where a supplier is located. COVID is showing that. Fires show that. Floods and disasters show that. It doesn't matter where your supplier is, they get impacted. But you're going to get the best support sometimes from your local suppliers if they're able to do so. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. Again, there's my email address. If anybody wants to reach out to me offline, email me directly. Be happy to respond and answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike, and thanks to everyone who joined us today to touch on this topic. And I was really happy with how interactive this conversation was. I know this is something that a lot of people are working on and thinking about, and that's great. I definitely encourage you. I'm sure if you want to have a deeper conversation with Mike about his experience and some of the things he's done, he'd be happy to connect with you. You can help connect with me as well. And if you do have questions about Procurated and tech resources and using that to discover new suppliers, that's also something that you can definitely reach out to me and Mike about. And Mike, Mike does a lot of trainings on Procurated and how it works. So if you want a deeper dive there, please don't hesitate to reach out to him.
Yeah, and I definitely want to thank everyone today for their time, for your engagement, as Steve mentioned, as well as your thoughts and comments. And I hope that this presentation today really helped to stir up within you the desire to move forward in making a difference in your local community. And I really do believe that as procurement professionals, we have that ability, we have that power to really make a difference in how our agency spends its money, how it supports the local economy in our community, but also how we support our agency in getting the best value and best product and service for our agency as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're getting some nice thank yous in the chat. Thank you right back. Again, if you have any questions, we're here for another minute. We can field any questions you have. Again, feel free to email them as well. And I would also say following this event, probably tomorrow, we will send out an email with the recording to the webinar. So if you have colleagues who you need to convince or you think would benefit from engaging with these topics that maybe they're not as tuned in on as you are, or you just want to share it out, feel free to share that link. Yeah. So yeah, we'll hold for any other questions. But in the meantime, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve, for putting this together. And I am going to put a little plug in too. We're hoping to kick off a series, webinar series called Open Mic with Mike, coming up soon, hosted by Procurated. And it's going to be some really hot topics for everybody to have that open discussion and dialogue on things that are facing procurement professionals today and going forward.
Yeah, definitely send it if you have topics you really want to talk about, and we'll definitely keep everyone in the loop on future events like this. If you have topics that you think are top of mind or you'd want to join us for a conversation on, if with like a panel discussion, reach out to Mike and myself and we'll make that happen. We're always looking to engage with our community in that exact way. All right. So it looks like we're getting a lot of thanks. And again, thanks everyone else, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday and a terrific week.